Hey everyone, it's 2023, around late July, and if you're watching this in real time or around this time, you know that everyone has been talking about the alien stuff. Yeah, the guy that testified to Congress that said that aliens are probably real, and I'm here to tell you that he's probably not telling the truth. And if you disagree with me, well, you can come and call me about it, because this is Truth Wanted, the live call-in show that is starting right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. And if you'd like to call us, you can do that at 512-991-9242 or through your computer at tiny.cc/calltw. Truth Wanted is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. We'd also like to welcome other new viewers today that are watching on Twitter and Twitch, although I guess we should start calling it X now. I don't want to call it X. I think that's stupid, but whatever. I guess it's officially X, so gotta make a note about that. But look, of course, everybody that's watching on YouTube is welcome here as always. And hey, you may be listening to this in other ways where you can listen to the show on Spotify and stuff after the show, but you should definitely come check out the show live if you're listening after the fact. Every single week I always have a special guest. This week is no different. It is the one and only Prophet of Zod. Prophet of Zod, welcome back to Truth Wanted.
Thank you. It is great to be back here with you again.
How long has it been since you've been on Truth Wanted? Like, what, 3 years or something? 2 years? Something like that?
I don't even remember.
It's been a while. I think it was pre-pandemic. I think it's been at least 3 years. So that's crazy. Anyways, Zod, welcome back to the show. Happy to have you. Zod, who the hell are you?
I am Prophet of Zod. I make YouTube videos about how there's no God and how you deal with people who think there's God and things like that. And I also sometimes appear on shows with you, apparently.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. I like that part of your explanation there. But no, yeah, Prophet of Zod, very cool dude. Happy to have you back. Prophet of Zod, we have a segment on this show that's called We Want the Truth Now. This is a new thing since you've been here. And what we do is we're reading the best comments in response to a question that we ask every single week, or a prompt. And so last week's prompt, we were asking, is it a bad idea? It is a bad idea to blank at a psychic reading. I apparently can't do normal reading, let alone psychic reading. But that is our first question here. It is a bad idea to blank at a psychic reading. And I'm going to read to you the top 3 answers that we picked from last week. So number 3 was from Anand Surya, who says, it's a bad idea to ask the psychic, is this your card, at a psychic reading? Which, I don't know. I mean, I would do it. Is it really that bad? That sounds like a fun time, right? Would you do that?
Probably something along those lines. Yeah.
Why not?
You got to yank their chain in some way.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've never actually done a psychic reading. We should probably do that. How cool would that be if we did a live psychic reading on the show? I've asked people to call in to do it before. I think it's happened like once, but it'd be cooler if we did something in person. We'll make a mental note of that for the future. But number 2 comes from Chuck Gatos, who says, it's a bad idea to perform an exorcism at a psychic reading. The departing demon might have been doing most of the work. And yeah, that's true. How do you know, like, who's doing what in those things, right? It's kind of hard to tell. I don't know. What do you think, Zod?
Performing an exorcism, I try not to mix forms of superstition, so I'd probably lean more toward asking them if that's their card. But this is a wonderful idea too, I think.
Yeah, could be. I almost guarantee that some crazy or somebody out there using like exorcisms like goes out to psychics and like tried this at least at one point, and it was probably very bad results, I imagine.
Yeah,
But
I'm sure I'm almost positive it's been done unironically at some point.
yeah, like I'm sure that's happened. But we have our number one answer here. It comes from TK Englander, who says it's a bad idea to bring your own haunting sound effects to a psychic reading, which again, I think it's a great idea, but the mental image alone does get this the number one spot, which is great. Like I imagine doing like Scooby-Doo sound reels in the back or something, like that'd be a really good time. So thank you guys so much for your answers for our questions last week. This week's prompt is a good one. It's write a horoscope that applies to everyone. Now, Zod, I mentioned this prompt to you and you wrote, I think, the perfect horoscope. So I would love to see other people top it. But Zod, what is your horoscope that applies to everyone?
You put a little pressure on me by calling me perfect, but
it's really good. I'll
give it my best read. Try not to make spooky noises on me, please, while I'm doing this. Okay.
I'll try not to, but no promises.
Okay. Today, you are going to be reminded of something that needed your attention. Be on the lookout for signs that someone in your life is going through something significant. It might be something difficult or it might be something exciting, but either way, being there for them might just be what they need. You're a giving person, but remember to maintain personal boundaries. People can often take advantage of your good nature if you let them. What you put out there has a way of coming back to you. Remember that consuming some amount of food will be important for nourishing your body as well as your mind. Be alert. Keeping your eyes open to opportunities and also to tripping hazards will help you get the most out of your day.
Okay, see, I feel like either you chat GPT this thing or you just happen to know every single horoscope stereotype under the sun. Because I think you covered all the bases. I don't know, guys, you have rough competition this week. So see if you can top Zod's answer. And I'd love to hear your best horoscopes in the comment section below. And hey, before we move on, this is a call-in show. We've got open lines right now. We'd love to talk to you about whatever you want to talk about, be it God, aliens, Bigfoot. And let me tell you, we may be talking about some alien stuff later. But before we do anything else, we actually have a super chat already. We are reading super chats. So you guys that are watching from YouTube, if you want to give a super chat and it's appropriate, we will read it on the show. This comes from Nitty, who gave $9.99. It says, all hail Zod, the prophet of YouTube's, who shows us the way. Look at that, Zod. That is wonderful that you're leading your people as a prophet.
Yeah, it's a bit of a burden and it goes a little bit against the spirit of what I'm doing, but I appreciate the gesture and the idea. Yes.
Yeah.
Nitty's a good person.
Yeah. Shout outs to Nitty for donating that. But Prophet of Zod, you are a YouTuber. We've known each other for quite a bit of a time here. I think it's time we do a bit of a maybe a plug here, maybe a little bit of announcement, maybe a little bit of a teaser here, but there is another reason. There's an ulterior motive why Zod is here today. One, because he's a great content creator, and I would feature him regardless. But Zod and I have also been working on some stuff on the side, and we are launching a little side project for the both of us. Zod, you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah. So. Yeah, Dan and I have talked about this for a long time. We enjoy doing stuff together. That's why, even though it's hard for me to get off, I have to get off work to do these shows, but I make the effort because Dan is just a lot of fun to do stuff with. So we decided it would be fun to do something a little more often. So we've decided to do our own live show where on every Thursday, we will do a live, basically a series of various different activities. So it's kind of like a variety show over the course of an hour. Mm-hmm. We'll respond to videos. We have a tier list or two lined up. Mm-hmm. We do little pranks on each other and make each other read weird things, and basically just try to have some kind of cool conversation, mostly focused on what it's like coming out of religion and religious culture. And it's a chance to hang out with you guys and enjoy being able to interact with you a little more closely than I can, at least when I do mostly recorded content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So full disclosure here. Okay. Let me get full disclosure. One, this is not an ACA show that's happening here. This is a me and Zod thing. Okay. So don't want to get that confused. We are doing a thing separate. We didn't give the name of it, Zod. The name is the most important part.
Yes. Everybody loves this name, I understand
Yes.
from the comments.
Yes.
The name is Zadanza.
And why is it called Zadanza?
If you'll notice, Dan, it has both the name Zod and the name Dan.
Yeah. It's like a bonanza, but
The
for
Zod
Zod
just,
and Dan.
yeah.
Danza. Anyway, it's going to be fun. It is it is not a call-in show. It is a sort of live react thing that we're doing, variety show. We'll be reacting to some videos. We'll be talking about stuff that interests us. But this isn't me saying, oh, I'm leaving Truth Wanted, or I'm not going to be doing call-in shows. As long as I can, I want to do Truth Wanted. I love doing it. And it's something that I helped started, so I obviously have a lot of fondness for it. So I'm always going to continue to do it as long as the ACA lets me. But this is just a separate thing that I'm doing just for fun. And so, yeah, we're going to be starting that next week, next Thursday. So I'm glad, Zod, you get to be here for us to talk about it. But I will always continue to keep hosting until I let you know otherwise. So don't think that this is me, doing some other crazy thing. If you notice, like, a lot of the hosts here at the ACA also like host on other shows, or they do their own YouTube stuff. Like, it's just a thing here. But just want to get that out of the way, that it's not an ACA thing. So we are only talking about it today, and that's it, because Zod is on. Yeah, that's kind of our excuse. Zod is here today, so we get to talk about it. But yeah, Thursday nights at 9 o'clock Central Time. Come check it out. Should be a cool time. But anyway, I think that's all the shilling that I want to do for that side thing. Zod, what else has been happening in the world that you want to talk about? Because I have something I want to talk about.
Yeah, I know you're going to nerd this place up with UFOs and stuff.
Oh, I'm going to nerd this place up with UFOs, Zod. It's happening.
That kind of stuff. UFOs, it's been a while for me. That used to be what I used to be skeptical about when I didn't want to focus my skepticism on Christianity. So it's been a good 10, 20 years. I look forward to getting into the UFO thing with you, getting my feet wet again.
Yeah. So two big things for me that have been interesting is, one is the Barbie movie, people reacting to that. That's just hilarious. Everybody calling this thing demonic and stuff. That's really funny. But a news item that I have been covering on this show and has finally happened, we've been talking about for a while, is Congress had a hearing this week about UAPs. Now, I have to be very specific about this phenomenon, this thing that I'm talking about, because everybody on the internet is like, oh, the government has just declared that aliens are real. And that's not true. Okay. That is not what happened. So I'm going to tell you what exactly happened. You know why, Zod? Because on Tuesday morning, I believe it was Tuesday, I listened to the entirety of this congressional hearing. It's like 4 hours long, and it was not fun for a lot of it. It was fun for part of it, I'm not going to lie. But like, congressional hearings are just that. They're boring, and nobody watches them for a reason, for the most part. People watch clips. I listened to the whole thing because I wanted to know what's up. So I'm about to give you the deets on what's happening in case you missed this. Okay. David Grush is the star witness in this hearing, but there are also two other former military members that attended this. The reason why David Grush, though, is the one people are talking about is because David Grush is the only one out of these three that testified to Congress that said aliens are real, according to him. And his reasoning is that the U.S. government has been covering up reverse engineering programs and programs that have captured crashed alien sites since at least the 1930s and 40s, which is pretty wild. Now, the reason why they're talking about this to Congress, they have a couple of different motivations here. One of them is that the other pilots included want to create some sort of program where they can report UAPs safely. According to the testimony of all three of the folks there, folks like themselves and others who have tried to report on UAP phenomenon, which, by the way, stands for unidentified aerial phenomenon, have been verbally intimidated or threatened by their jobs, right, to not talk about the things that they saw. So they're basically saying, look, we want to kind of petition for Congress to look into this so that we can have a better reporting mechanism. There's debate on whether that's actually needed and like if these kinds of things exist already. But again, the star of the show here is David Grush, because David Grush, even though he hasn't actually seen this stuff himself, has been a part of U.S. intelligence agencies before. He's actually done work for the U.S. government. He has had clearance to see a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that nobody else is allowed to talk about. And he claims that the government is covering this stuff up. So it's not Congress. It's not our government making an official statement saying, oh, aliens are real. It's one guy testifying in front of Congress saying that aliens are real. You know who else has testified in front of Congress, Zod?
I know a few examples.
Mr. Rogers. Okay. The fact that Mr. Rogers has testified in front of Congress, and if he said aliens are real, that doesn't mean that the government says the aliens are real. Mr. Rogers has actually testified to talk about funding for PBS. But the point is, anybody can testify in front of Congress, right? It doesn't actually mean anything. The other important thing here is, one, he's never seen this stuff himself, right? He's only talking about what other people have seen in allegedly his agency and others, although he's very, very vague on the details. But also, he didn't actually give any specific details about the organizations that are doing cover-ups or what exactly they're covering up, only that there's non-human phenomenon. So that's kind of a problem because, like, you kind of need evidence for this stuff. He also said that he's personally been intimidated for trying to speak out about some of this stuff. But again, no evidence for that either. It's all been hearsay at this point. Now, throughout the entire hearing, if you listen to it, folks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other folks that were asking him on specific details were like, hey, what are some of these groups? What do we need to look into to do this? And he said, oh, I'll tell you in a private skiff, a skiff being a private room, basically where, there's full security and where there's no risk of people overhearing information said, right? So he's basically like, I will tell you in private conversation, but not in this congressional hearing, which is like, what is the point of having the congressional hearing and talking about this stuff on record if you're just going to be like, oh, I actually can't talk about it? It's kind of silly. So yeah, point is, I can talk about this all day, Zod, but there's no actual evidence that's been presented so far that aliens are real and that the government's doing anything about it. Just one guy saying it. So that's it. That's what's happening.
So I have a question when I hear about all this. How much of this intimidation and retribution and stuff is just people saying you're stupid on the grounds that they're saying stupid things?
Right? That's the thing. I mean, like, we can't, maybe he does have evidence like he claims that he does, but until he submits it to a public forum, there's no way for any of us to be able to evaluate what he's saying, right? And to be clear, the Pentagon is today made a statement saying that what he's saying isn't true. NASA has already said that they found no evidence of life, and one or two other agencies have spoken out about this. So whatever he's talking about, apparently Congress isn't aware because he's testifying to them, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? And a lot of big agencies are saying that this isn't true. So I don't know what he's talking about or who he's talking about. Yeah,
it smells a little bit like the university won't take me seriously when I try to teach alternatives to evolution. Like,
it's kind of like that.
If you go around saying stupid things, people are going to say you're stupid and ignore you. And my gut tells me that might be a lot of what they're facing in terms of backlash, but who could ever know?
Yeah, I mean, so again, he does have credentials. I'm not saying that he's some guy that's off the street coming out of the woodwork saying this stuff, right? I think that's why people are making a big deal. He has worked in U.S. intelligence, and he's worked with several agencies on different kinds of things, especially in regards to aerial phenomenon. He was on a committee that was supposed to be reporting on unidentified aerial phenomenon within the Pentagon. And that's part of why he spoke out about this, apparently, is because of the things he's heard. But as far as things he's seen, unless he said otherwise, which I don't think he hasn't actually seen any stuff himself. It's just him talking about what other people have talked about. So it's kind of a nothing burger. Until we get more from this, it's all we got.
And from what I remember, it's like I said, it's been a while since I've been into UFOs. The movement is filthy with some guy who has some credentials. Like,
yeah,
it's never some guy out of the woodwork. They're like, oh, this guy is a something, so-and-so scientist or so-and-so government agent, and he said blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know. It sounds a lot like more of the same, except they got more public attention.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about Grish is he does have a degree in physics as well. So he is specifically asked some questions as to, like, how does this work? Like, how are beings getting here if we're like light years away? And he's like, oh, well, he can speculate that, it's actually the universal hologram theory, right? This idea that the universe as it's projected is a hologram, and there's ways you can manipulate that to, show yourself in other places. But it's like, it's weird. He's definitely probably one of the most credentialed people that has ever spoken out about something like this. Definitely in my lifetime, certainly probably in the history of this phenomenon. But that doesn't do much unless we see anything else besides testimony, right? Like that's all we have is him saying that these are things that are happening, and that's it, But a lot of people say things are happening. I don't know. It's kind of a big deal. And look, if this even was happening, let's say that there was some merit to it, there's got to be some people that are reporting on this and some people who are reporting too. One of the offices of the president is commander in chief, right? Like they're supposed to be briefed every day on national security threats. You would think that the president at least would have some idea about intergalactic phenomenon that the US might have to fight, Independence Day style, right? But if folks like, I don't know, our former president actually had that information, I feel like that they would, at least allude to it. I mean, not every president, let's just say, has had a great record of keeping secrets on certain things. So I don't know. It's a lot.
But if you were to try to construct a conspiracy theory around it, which they might try to do, he's the kind of president who the people around him try to babysit and maybe not tell all the secrets. If you're referring to the same guy.
Yeah, but maybe it isn't go to the president. Maybe it just goes to some guy in the Department of Defense. I mean, I don't know. It does seem like that's going to be like a national security thing, right? Seems like that you want to prepare for that. So somebody has to know. But hey, that's it. That's all I got on this right now. Unless folks want to ask about it or say that I'm wrong, but I don't think David Grush's testimony is something that we have to weigh on the side of, yes, this is true. All it is testimony, and it's not even that. It's really is literally hearsay. It's not him attesting to events. It's, well, I heard other people talk about it, which I think is the definition of hearsay. I'm no big city lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's hearsay. So anyways, so aliens are real, right? Totally believe that.
I'm at a 9 out of 10 after hearing this. All right, so an intelligence officer with credentials actually testified. So
Zod's on the side of aliens. That's cool. I'm not. Okay, don't think that this is there. So please call in if you think otherwise. But we'll continue to talk about our regular spiel as well. Speaking of which, we do have some folks that want to talk to us. Zod, you ready to take some calls?
I think I can tolerate one.
Okay, all right. I'm glad because this is kind of a call-in show. It would kind of be bad if you couldn't. But hey, before we get started with our first call, we have to thank the patron of the week. Every single week, we always give a shout out to the folks who donate on Patreon. You guys rock. If you want to donate and get your name shouted out, it's tiny.cc/PatreonTW. There's a couple different tiers that you can donate to, but if you donate, you'll always get your name shouted out. So this week's patron of the week is going to be what do we got? Oh, it's going to go on the screen. James Fitzwater. Thank you so much, James Fitzwater, for donating. And thank you, of course, to everybody that donates on the Patreon. You guys rock. So with that done, I think it's time for us to take some calls. You ready?
I am ready.
Okay. So first call of the night, we have the Unworthy Servant, who is calling in from Texas. The Unworthy Servant, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hello, Dan.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Yeah, it's great so far. Zod, how are you doing? You doing good?
I'm doing pretty well as well. Yes.
All right, Unworthy Servant, we're doing okay. How can we help you?
You said that I need to prove some conspiracy theories. And there are some conspiracy theories which I believe are not conspiracy theories. I believe they have a strong argument. And one of it will be Christianity is the most detested and the most hated religion in the face of the world. Now, I know that you're going to say that, a majority of Americans are Christians, and the Western world Christianity has a high influence. But we know that Republicans are not Christians. We know that Democrats are not Christians. We know that the left is not Christian, the right is not Christian, the independents are not Christian. All these people are not Christians. So, and when you get down to the bottom of it, I think that a true Christian is someone who believes Christ is Lord and Savior. So,
Okay.
why do you think that Christianity is the most hated religion? Let me start off with that.
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I think it's more appropriate to ask, do I think Christianity is the most hated religion? And I actually don't know. Is it the most hated religion? I mean, are we talking about historically, or we're talking about percentage-wise on Earth? Does it have the plurality of religious hate? I don't know. What do you think, Zod?
I would just be curious how that was determined. I think nailing down one most hated religion is going to be tricky. I do think I wouldn't be surprised if Christianity was widely disliked.
Yeah.
Across the world, if for no other reason than it of all religions most successfully and enthusiastically spread itself into everybody else's territory. That is going to get you some enemies for pretty legitimate reasons.
Right.
So that is one factor. I don't know that it really is the most hated religion in the world, and I don't know that that's something you could, or at least that anybody has very easily quantified.
Yeah.
It's going to be very regional, and a lot's going to go into how you identify actually who a Christian is. And a lot of what was packed into this question were statements that Republicans aren't Christians, Democrats aren't Christians. And I'm a little curious. I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit trail, Dan, it's up to you. I'm a little curious if that means that all those people aren't Christians, which I would find to be extremely dubious.
Also, not being a Christian doesn't mean that you hate Christians either, right?
Yeah.
So there is something to consider there. And if we're considering atheism as a religion, which is debatable, I would say that atheism is actually probably the most detested, because Christians definitely have something to say about it. Muslims definitely have something to say about it. I'm sure there's other religious groups that definitely don't like atheists. So there's something to think about too.
I would actually say, if we're talking about within the U.S., calling Christianity the most hated religion or anything close is pretty absurd, because it's widely practiced. All the politicians have to appeal to it on some level in order to have any kind of success. Even if you want to claim that the majority of Americans who identify as Christian are not true Christians, I don't think you display your hatred for a religion by identifying as
that is a
religion.
Great point, Zod. If it's true that Christianity is the most hated religion, why does, even if Republicans and Democrats are all not secretly Christians, why do they make so many appeals to it, right? Why don't they make appeals to Islam? Because people in this country hate Islam, right? There's a lot of people that are like, oh no, we really don't like that religion, but Christianity is okay. So it's the religion that they make appeals to. It doesn't make sense to make appeals to the most hated religion, right? That, if anything, would be kind of a downside to your campaign, at least in America. But we've spoken a lot here, the Unworthy Servant. What do you think?
Well, what I think, Christianity, let me clarify. I'm not saying that Christians don't have the freedom to practice their religion. Especially in the United States, there is not even a single persecution or attack against Christians. I understand that. What I am saying is, when people go through the phase of deconstruction, I see that the people who used to be Christians, people who are former Christians, after they live Christianity, they are the most hostile towards the idea. For example, people, a lot of people on the atheism or secular path, or most people, I could give you several examples. Even some of the hosts in the atheist community of Austin, they used to be Christians. After they come out, they just hate the idea of Christianity. For example,
Okay. Well, let's stop right there, because originally you said it's the most hated religion in the world. And atheists do not make up the majority of the world. Okay. The fact that, every single atheist in the world could hate Christians, and that wouldn't make it the most hated religion in the world, right? Like, I think atheists as a minority are too small for that statistically. But also, like, yeah, a lot of the hosts, including me, are former Christians. Zod, also former Christian, and regular hosts, a lot of them are former Christians. And we talk about Christianity because Christianity is definitely super, super harmful. I am not the majority of the opinions of most Americans, right? Most Americans who hear what we have to say are immediately going to tune us out. One, because we're atheists and they don't like listening to atheists, but also like because Christianity is a very popular and influential religion. Like it has a lot of sway for people. So like the fact that we hate it, yeah, we're like one atheist organization. There's not that many atheist organizations. There is like thousands of churches out there. So there's something to be said about the difference in power differentials there, right? Even if every single person at the ACA hates Christianity, that doesn't make it the most hated religion in the world.
And I think there's some room for clarification here, because just speaking from my personal experience, and I'm not all atheists, I am a former Christian. I think Christianity does a lot of harm. And because it's the most influential religion in my society, I am going to focus on it and focus on its most detrimental effects. And I am going to, most of what I do is being there for people who are leaving the faith or doubting. So there is going to be more focus on Christianity. On the other side, my relationship with the religion's a little complicated because I'm opposed to a lot of the ideas of the religion, but I'm certainly not opposed to the people. I have a lot of family members who are still Christian, and I would get very defensive and very angry if people started becoming insulting or derogatory or hateful to Christians as people. So I know I'm not all atheists. I know there are other people who probably react differently, but I would challenge our caller to think a little bit about taking care with avoiding generalities, I guess.
Yeah.
It's easy to, and this goes both ways. It's easy for a Christian to think that we're all extremely hateful, and especially once you get into an algorithm rabbit hole where you're seeing content for or against your side, to see the other side generally as being more hateful than it is. And I wonder if that's a lot of the perception that is leading to a broad strokes characterization of atheists and to how we perceive the religion, and whether that's maybe spilling over into some generalization about the world hating Christianity more than any other.
Yep. Anyway, we've been talking a lot again here. Sorry, go ahead, Unworthy Servant.
Well, I never said that people hate Christians more than others. I'm saying that the idea of Christianity is hated, the doctrine and the theology. Even some Christian churches don't preach Christianity or the proposed ideas, because Christianity is a religion or a faith that says you don't have to do anything to get a reward. And naturally, when you think about it, even since we were like little kids, since the time of childhood, we were told that no pain, no gain. You have to work hard to gain a reward. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if you want to become, like employee of the month, you have to work hard. In every aspect of life, you have to work hard to gain reward. Christianity says that you don't have to work hard. You're not justified by your good works. So even the people who, like put their hands on oath, take an oath on the Holy Bible, they don't even accept the idea that. That's why at the beginning of the call, I said that Republicans are not Christians, because Republicans are it is a party that says that you have to work hard or you just have to die, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that is against the idea of Christianity. Because
the thing is, your interpretation of Christianity is one of many, 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 many interpretations of Christianity. I mean, like, many people have died over their interpretations of Christianity from other people who have called themselves Christians, right? Like, this is just a debate that it will never end. I don't know if we can honestly say this is the one true Christianity. Let's say that you have access to exactly what Jesus thought and exactly what he meant in everything that he preached. Does it actually matter? Because if more Christians are saying, no, this is what Christianity is, I mean, I'm going to listen to what they have to say, right? Like that is at least one version of Christianity. Maybe it's not the ultimate truth, but it doesn't matter. It's still a popular idea and it's still a very influential one. So our criticism of that is still worthy, even if it's not the true Christianity, right? But I don't know that people have access to exactly what Jesus' intentions were, or Paul's intentions were, or any of the writers of the gospel, right? All we have are human interpretation. And so as long as we live in a world where human interpretation is going to be the arbiter between what we know as true Christianity versus anything else, it's all going to be a pointless discussion anyway, right? So I'm just going to listen to what people say and how people describe themselves as Christians and then take it from there. I don't have any skin in the game anymore by saying, oh, this is the real Christianity. That doesn't matter. What matters is, okay, if this Christian construct is harming people, I'm going to talk about it and tell you why that's wrong, why we shouldn't live in a society that should support that. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
What harms do you think that Christianity has done? Because I know that it's like a propaganda that you have to pull out right there. It's like, oh, Christianity is really harmful, but I don't see any harms to it. Like, I mean, I could only see the benefits. So what is the harm of?
Well, we don't have time.
Yeah. Can I try to give a broad strokes answer?
Yeah, give it broad strokes.
Yeah, you could go all day back and forth about whether Christianity causes harm or not and evaluate different specific actions across history and stuff. But I think if I were to give the quickest answer is that it suggests ideas of morality based on divine dictate, basically based on a book, based on people's impressions of what God wants. And it says that alone is good reason to decide how people should act. And it includes motivations based on undemonstrated claims about the supernatural. And so I can't claim that always, or even most of the time, leads people to do bad things, but it throws a level of randomness into the process that I think is dangerous, if not always directly harmful. So if I were to try to give a short answer, that would be the best I could do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think every time you say an action is good or bad, it should be based on the demonstrable effects of that action and not on somebody claiming that they know what God wants.
Yeah.
And as soon as that last part enters into the conversation, we're off the rails and there's at least the potential of danger.
Absolutely. All right. Any final thoughts, Unworthy Servant, before we wrap up this call?
Well, thank you for listening to me, you guys. I hope that we will have a very good conversation in the future. Dan, we have spoke before, but thank you for taking my calls. Have a good night.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, I recognize the caller's voice. Obviously, folks, I'm going to use the name that people say they want to use, and that's what I do. But listen, if you've called into the show before and you've listened to this and other programs, we talk about the harms of Christianity like all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like how people have been harmed by it. Like it's just, I don't know how you don't know, right? Like I don't even want to go into examples because we do it literally every week. So I don't know. I would say listen to other people, listen to when they tell their stories and see how it could be harmful. Really think about it because it's there. But anyway, that's all the time we got for that call. Zod, before we move on, I have to talk about some things. First of all, once again, we are accepting super chats and we will read them live on the air. So feel free to send us something, and assuming they're YouTube appropriate, we'll give it a read. Of course, you can donate by going to our Patreon. You can also support the show by becoming a member, though. If you do become a member, you get emojis in the chat, your name gets highlighted, and you'll be immune to the slow mode. And you can do that for as little as 99 cents a month. So you should definitely check that out. I'm also going to do this plug as well. We have a limited edition t-shirt that is really great. It's Feeling Cute Today, Might Destroy the Universe, Might Adopt the Cat, IDK. I love it. It's a good shirt. It's the last chance to get this shirt because next month, we're going to get a different shirt. So as soon as July ends, we'll have another exclusive shirt for the next month. And that's just how we do things. And of course, we have our other Truth Wanted merch in the store. So check that out if you want to support the show. And lastly, before I move on, if you want to listen to audio only versions of the show, there is a way to do that. You can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcast for all the latest ACA shows. We have a huge number of listeners that just listen to audio, which is cool. I'm glad that people can still enjoy the show, even if they're not watching my dumb face or Zod's handsome face. By the way, it's, we don't encourage people commenting about people's appearances, but Zod is, I hope I look like Zod when I get to Zod's age, because Zod, you're a handsome man. Did you know that? You're a very good looking guy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yes. And with that comment out of the way, I think it's time for some other calls. You ready to keep going, Zod?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's keep going. This should be an interesting one. We have Quarlo. Tell me if I'm saying that incorrectly, but Quarlo calling in from Texas. You are live on Truth Wanted. Quarlo, how can we help?
Hey, Dan. Hey, Zod. Good evening, gentlemen. I hope you're doing well. And yes, Zod is a very handsome man. And listen, Zod, I'm so sorry about that whole Kal-El thing. I was rooting for you, man. I was rooting for you that night at the end of the movie. Well, it's been a fun week for the UFO people.
It certainly has.
I've been all over the. Yeah, I've been looking at a lot of comments, and what I wanted to call about was it's almost religious. The people who are sure that we've been visited, it's almost like a religious conviction. And I'm a skeptic, so I suggest that, well, evidence would be nice. Evidence would be really good. But if you even suggest that life in this galaxy, intelligent, technologically advanced intelligent life, might be rare, people get angry. They come at you. Oh, you're just not looking at how many stars there are, and you're just crazy. There's so much evidence. No, there's not very much evidence. So yeah. I wish skeptics would be a little more skeptical. And believe me, I grew up. I'm an old fart. I grew up on all those great old shows. I would love it if there was other alien life, but I'm not going to let that wish bias my examination of the evidence.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And look, we live in the internet age, right? We have more access to information than ever before, but that also means we have a lot of access to really bad information, right? And I think that this is where some of this is stemming from. We're also living in a time where there's conspiracy theories like just everywhere, right? Like you can just open up any app and somebody's going to be talking about something that is either demonstrably not true or so speculative you can't even say it's true or not, right? So aliens kind of fall into that, and they also fall into other kinds of related conspiracies. If you think the government and the world order is real and Jewish people are hiding up, secrets and stuff, you may be more inclined to believe that, yeah, government is hiding aliens and stuff too, right? So there's also these crossbreeding between these different communities of folks that may have very disparate beliefs, but have related ways of thinking and related ways of communicating about the kinds of evidence that they have for these claims. So yeah, they're definitely having a field day this week. I was checking out the UFO Reddit and a bunch of other places, and everyone's just freaking out about this. I haven't seen a freak out about this since honestly ever, because it is a big deal. Talking about this in a congressional hearing, that's not nothing. But it kind of is nothing in a way, at least if you know what was actually said. So anyway, Zod, any comment about people being religious in this circumstance, or at least having some sort of mania?
I always hesitate a little bit to stretch the meaning of that word, but I do get where you're coming from with that. There's definitely a mentality that goes beyond just normal academic evidence-based curiosity, and you do get a very strong reaction when you oppose it. So I definitely think there's something that resembles religious fervor.
Yeah, certainly.
Religious is an imprecise word there, but it's kind of it's a fervor. It's a fervor to want it to be true. And anomaly. Oh, by the way, Dan, I think I didn't learn this until last week. I think they've changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomenon, because that includes them going underwater and through mountains and in Walmart. It's anywhere they show up. So aerial is now an obsolete term as far as I'm told. Well, people have been noting and believing weird things since there have been people. 500 years ago, anybody you ask would say, "Oh yes, witches can fly over houses and slide under doors." And 3,000 years ago, when a shepherd got struck by lightning, "Oh, that's the gods." And 20,000 years ago, when the volcano erupted, well, that's the spirit of the volcano. You know, people have always come up with explanations for things they couldn't understand, and I think that's largely what's going on now. I saw something I couldn't identify. Aliens. It's aliens.
Yeah, well, I mean,
people would take a step back.
To be fair, right? There was 3 people that testified at this trial. Only one of them, and I say trial, it's a hearing. Only one of them actually says aliens are a thing. The other 2, the former pilots, were saying that they saw something that they couldn't identify, and they weren't able to really talk about it, or weren't really asked about it for a long time. Like, that was the limits of their testimony. They were pretty much neutral on the question of aliens. David Grush is the only guy that's actually saying it, and that's why, like, he's making the headlines here, right? So even other people that are reporting on UAP phenomenon are not like the first to jump on this thing saying, like, yeah, this is totally 100% non-human activity. They're just saying, look, there is this phenomenon that's happening, and I feel like my livelihood is threatened if I talk about it, and there should be some sort of method to talk about it. Like, half of the hearing was basically talking about, okay, how do we improve this? This is just like a policy thing, right? Like, half of it was kind of like a PTA meeting in that sense. It's like, oh, okay, how do we come up with we're going to have this committee look at this committee look at this. I mean, that's what like most congressional hearings are. The aliens part was just kind of the spice on this little hearing here. But yeah, very interesting stuff.
Being able to safely report, but not be in fear of your job on something you saw and couldn't identify, that's a great idea.
Sure.
That would help clear up a lot of misunderstandings and misreporting. But yes, I watched. I didn't watch as much as you did. I couldn't get through it, but I watched the boiled down version. And yeah, when he started talking about interdimensionality and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, you're just speculating. You're just speculating now. The 3 most important words for any skeptic, and I get this, I hear this every ACA broadcast. The 3 most important words a skeptic can keep in mind is, I don't know. I don't know. So if I see a large triangular object moving through the sky at night, I'm not going to go, oh, it's from Proxima Centauri. Oh, it's an alien. I'm going to say, I don't know what the fuck that was.
Yeah.
I wish people would be more willing to say, I don't know what the fuck that was.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, that's part of it. And the people who actually saw things on the days that they're talking about at the hearing were saying that. David Grush, who actually hasn't seen anything himself, which he has admitted, is the one that's like, no, guys, it's actually aliens, which is really interesting. By the way, I mean, you are right in saying that. Well, so the UAP thing is still the term that's being used, just to clarify on that as well, because a lot of people ask, like, why is that a thing? So there's an office within the United States that's called the Office of the Secretary of Defense, right? And in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, there is a task force. It used to be called the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force. It is now called the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And David Grush was a part of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So he has processed, some of these sightings and reports and presumably other things, right? And that's where part of his testimony is coming from. But he hasn't actually witnessed any of this stuff himself. And it is through his career that he has claimed that threats to his life, as well as threats to friends and family, have occurred. But again, no evidence besides his testimony about it so far. So we'll see if anything comes out of these private meetings and stuff. But I'm skeptical. I don't know if it's going to happen. Anyway, Zod, any other thoughts on this?
No,
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, it just sounds like more of the same. I don't really think it adds up to much. I guess we'll see if he drops some bombshells in that little secret side room. Maybe it'll eventually come out, but until then, it just sounds like a lot of rumors. And I do think there should be a channel for people to report things that they think are weird. But if you escalate that to the point that you're running around talking about aliens and flying saucers and stuff, then you have to expect that's going to reflect on your professionalism a little bit, and people might respond appropriately.
Yeah.
It all depends on how the story is being represented and what actually happened.
For real. I think that's all that can really be said about that. Quarlo, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I wanted to explain my name, Quarlo. That's from an old Outer Limits episode called Soldier, written by Harlan Ellison. Guy from the future. Harlan Ellison actually sued Outer Limits because they sued James Cameron because he claimed that he stole the idea to make Terminator Orlo Cropregni, REMTNDO. He was a soldier from the future that came back to our present, and he didn't have a good time. So anyway.
Wow, that is a very random trivia fact.
I hope they're out there.
Yeah.
I hope they're out there, but I'm not holding my breath. Not holding my breath. Life could be very rare, or we could be it. Everybody could have wiped each other out 500 million years ago. We could be the last remaining intelligent civilization.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I don't know either, Quarlo.
Gentlemen, thank you for great.
Yeah, thank you for calling in. Sorry to interrupt you there. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay between call and host there, but yeah, thanks for calling in, and thank you for also giving what might be one of the most complicated backstories I've ever heard for a call name. That's a lot going on in there that I had no idea about. But Zod, you smiled. Have you seen what he's talking about, that Outer Limits episode?
No, I've heard a general backstory about him suing Outer Limits for not Outer Limits, sorry, Terminator. I heard that had been accused of plagiarism, but I didn't know the rest of it about the Outer Limits and stuff.
Yeah, that's news to me, but I'm not surprised that my general audience knows about these trivia matters, I guess. Not trivial. I guess it is trivial, though, but that sounds so condescending when you say trivial. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, doesn't matter. Folks, this is a call-in show. We're going to keep taking calls, but before I get to the next call, I have to let you know that this week, if you're going to be in Austin, this weekend, rather, we are going to be broadcasting live in the Free Thought Library for Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen is going to have a double trouble of two Jamies. We got Jamie Boone and new host Jamie the Blind Limey. So I don't know how they're going to differentiate on air, like which Jamie you're going to be talking to. I'm excited to find out, though. So that's going to be funny. And hey, if you like my face, I'm going to be on Atheist Experience with Christy Powell that day. So doors open at noon. And of course, it is completely free. So if you're in Austin, come on by, and would love to meet you for that. And also, there's going to be an awesome experience. It's something that the ACA tries to do every year. It's the annual back cruise that's happening Saturday, August 26th this year. So basically, what a back cruise is you show up on a boat and you go down Austin in the river, and you see some bats come out from the Congress Avenue Bridge, which is really cool. And there's going to be a lot of cool ACA personalities there, like Forrest Valkai and J Mike and a bunch of other hosts. I am not going to be able to make it this year, unfortunately. I usually try to go, but I actually had some other plans that I have to attend to. But yeah, come on down. It's going to be at Lady Bird Lake, and I think there's still a couple of tickets left, but the tickets are definitely, I think, within the single digits now. So you should definitely jump on that if you haven't already. Link to that's going to be in the description. So yeah, with that done, let's keep going with these calls. This next one I think is also interesting. We're going to talk to Brandt calling in from Wisconsin. Brandt, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello. I'm looking to talk about Thomas Ligotti's Conspiracy Against the Human Race. Have you ever heard of that book before?
I have, and I have actually read it. I've read, I didn't finish it, but I do have it. It's on my Kindle, and I've read through about half of it. I should have finished it, though. It is a very interesting book. But what about that book did you want to talk about?
Everybody's talking about conspiracies, and I think the conspiracy he brings up is just a conspiracy of like existential dread, the lack of meaning, addiction to life, and this like desire to perpetuate it, to create our own meanings. And I feel like, as you said, we should be more skeptical about bringing people. Like, we should be more skeptical. Like, bringing people into the world is a very complex decision, and there's like a lot of things that are involved in that are like very painful for people and complex and desire upsetting and just full of existential dread. And I feel like people just don't want to talk about like the horrors that you could potentially face in life. Skull crushing is one of the things that he mentions in the book.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't finish
real.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, Brant. But yeah, I didn't finish the book, but I thought it was very interesting. Thomas Ligotti's sort of philosophy, he talks about these very existential themes, right? And when this title, Conspiracy Against the Human Race, is kind of this idea of saying, look, the real truths about the world are really dark, right? There may be no purpose to life. We may be evolving towards nowhere, and there's nowhere that we're going to go when we die, right? And all that is like very hard to swallow for most people. So we kind of come up with these other kinds of ideas and sort of lie to ourselves about life having this meaning and there being grand narratives and these purposes, even though none of that may be true. And he even goes as far as to say, if I recall, that voluntary human extinction might be like, the most ethical thing we can do, although obviously a very unlikely thing for us to happen, right? And so these ideas are really interesting. I like reading. Yeah, I like reading books on existential philosophy, especially stuff that's as pessimistic as Ligotti is. If you're interested in the history of pessimism and philosophy, it all goes back to Schopenhauer, really. But I mean, Nietzsche has talked about this. Lots of folks who've talked about human society and this idea that there are these kinds of fundamental truths that the denial of or acceptance of will completely change the course of human history. And Ligotti's whole point, if I recall, is, yeah, it's kind of like a conspiracy. It's kind of like these ideas are just so harmful towards human psychology that it's almost not even worth thinking about. And so what do we do with that?
Yeah.
And I think there's some merit to like, look, maybe there is some things that we can just kind of have, even if they're not true. There is something to that. I'm not going to say that, like, look, every single person on earth has to think the exact same way I do about afterlives and about gods and things like that. I understand that maybe these things aren't literally true, but there might be some value in even contemplating these ideas and maybe even in believing them. That being said, though, the real criticisms I have when we talk about these ideas is the institutions behind them. In other words, the folks that are making huge decisions that affect everybody's lives based on their beliefs, right? I mean, that's why organizations like the ACA exist, is to talk about the separation of religion and government. I'm not here to say, yeah, if your grandmother died at a funeral, you should tell your parents and say like, well, actually, God's not real. So the fact that you're praying about it is really kind of dumb. Like, that's just kind of cringe, right? Like, you don't want to be that guy. But it's more just like, okay, there are some truths that I'm going to have to accept if I want to live an honest life for myself and for the folks around me. And they may be hard to swallow, but like that's what we're given, right? But anyway, am I doing a fair summary of it, Branch? Because like I said, I didn't finish the book, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, you're doing a fair summary of it. I think a lot of what also kind of gets into it is like, as you said, with religion, people do have them as kind of like a coping mechanism of sorts. Like you face these existential dreads, like the potential that there could be like no meaning in life, and like you face all this pain and frustration of desires constantly on like a daily basis throughout your life. And people have to cope with that in some ways. So it's a natural thing to turn to religion, to turn to spirituality, to turn to, and basically anything you can turn to as a coping mechanism, to like friends, family, so on and so forth, hobbies.
Yeah.
Just to basically distract yourselves from the pain. And he kind of gets into how there's like distraction mechanisms that we use, a bunch of different mechanisms that people use to basically cope with things. And I think, as you said, like you mentioned that like your problem was like religion isn't the fact that it's like they're having a wrong knowledge, because wrong knowledge isn't inherently harmful. You could believe grass grows at 2 inches per second, and that's completely wrong. It just doesn't grow that fast, but it's not going to harm anybody to like have that wrong fact. But what you just think is bad is that there's harms that come with the institution, such as like taking away women's reproductive rights and stuff like that, which I 100% agree is harmful.
I think that's a fair summation. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think an imposition that like is also just as harmful and is like the problem that brings about all these harms that like are potential is birth, as Thomas Ligotti brings up.
Right.
So like if we didn't have children in the future, there wouldn't be the impositions of future religious tyranny potentials and all these things, all these struggles and existential things that we
I'll be honest, Brant. One of the reasons why I read Thomas Ligotti's book is he's one of the only modern writers that I know about that has talked extensively about antinatalism, and longtime listeners of the show know I'm very sympathetic towards an antinatalist view. But that is, neither here nor there. I want to let Zod chime in on this conversation. Zod, I know you haven't probably read this book, but
yeah, I've been a little quiet because I just simply don't really know what the book's about, and I don't want to speak out of turn. But I think what I'm hearing is that there can be advantage to religion or a positive function to it, just as a way to help us cope with existential dread or with just the big, I don't know, all the problems in the universe can kind of come down on you and feel crushing. And I guess if you try to think of the sum total of your life and how small you are in the universe and all the bad things that are going to happen to you and how short your life is, that can just feel overwhelming. Is that kind of the crux of the problem, roughly speaking?
I think Ligotti's book, again, this is from reading it, I don't know how long ago, but less than a year ago, was look, life is suffering, basically. Like there's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about conscious existence. It may be the case that life is more suffering than it is pleasure, at least for some people, right? And so we have to cope with that. We have to deal with that potential reality. And he mostly talks about that and talks about the ways in which people cope. But in reality, at least according to his worldview, is that we may have nothing to do with this. This is, again, in sort of the vein of pessimistic philosophy, which, again, I talk about Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer also wrote about this, right? He talks about the will, right? He talks about people's will and saying, the will is just going to want things, and you're always going to want things, right? The hedonistic treadmill is always going to be there, and we may never be satisfied. So it's kind of an extension of that idea.
I think I take this as presenting kind of what could be an artificial dichotomy, unless I'm misunderstanding part of the book. But I think an artificial dichotomy could be taken from this between accepting full-on religious factual delusions about the world and our place in it, what happens after we die. And then on the other hand, constantly staring in the face every possible bit of existential dread you could focus on, or constantly thinking about all these big negative questions. If you really sit there and think about the actual facts of life and dwell on that and carry it with you every day, that could feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think there is a place in the middle where you can just focus on the good in life. You can kind of know that's there and pack it away. And that can become a form of subconscious delusion. And I would say it probably is, even for me. I don't sit there and think about all the terrible things that are going to happen and how soon I'm probably going to die and my parents are going to die and all that kind of stuff. That's all true. And I don't try to deny it through some kind of conjecture about the afterlife or spiritual meaning. But I do let myself focus on what today's like, probably take more joy in my current situation than maybe I would if I were thinking about all the morbid details of life. And I think to that extent, I might delude myself a little bit, but I don't delude myself to the fact that it steers my life in a weird direction or allows for weird theological rules or impositions and things like that. So I think just speaking really roughly, I think there is a middle ground, and there are kind of innocent ways to slightly delude yourself and kind of know you're doing it, which I do on a daily basis, to be honest.
Yeah, one of the things Ligotti gets into is that we have to constantly delude ourselves. Otherwise, we're basically going to go mad, or we have to be like extremely sadistic, because just the phones and the computers that we're using to communicate with each other right now have the lithium batteries are mined by slave labor, basically. I mean, like the diets we eat, even if you're a vegan of sorts, like you're gonna be getting some extent or another, like animals ground up in the field and stuff like that. Like no matter
It's
what,
true.
you're contributing to mass amounts of suffering. As Schopenhauer points out, when the lion tears apart the gazelle is experiencing far more suffering than the lion is experiencing pleasure. And it's the same for all experiences of death and consumption. So if you have to constantly tune yourself out to reality, otherwise it's extremely maddening. And people just it's the nature of reality is like billions of years of evolution programmed into us. So we do have these abilities to tune this out. So we are kind of not really solipsistic, but kind of in a way like stuck in our own minds. We don't like we have a level of empathy that's kind of developed through like in the human species, but even then it's not like you can look at like people who are like really empathetic, like truly just like really empathetic, and just they get torn apart. Like a lot of them commit suicide and stuff. And when it comes down to it, like you have to be really, really, really tuned out to reality, I think, in order to like be able to not be depressed, or you have to have a level of like sadism, I think, to some extent or another.
I am of a similar thought process. I've referenced David Benatar's work, Never to Have Been, who talks about this idea. In the beginning of his book, he's like, well, human beings have a psychological bias to basically say that things are fine and things are okay and normal when really it's not, right? Like we may have a bias to try to find the positivity in ourselves and in the world when it may just be objectively false, right? It just may not be true. And if you're someone like me who is also sympathetic to this overall idea of a negative utilitarian point of view, which is like suffering, the conscious diminishing of suffering is more important than the active gain of pleasure, then that's going to comport to your worldview. I mean, I am sympathetic to that, but I mean, to Zod's point, if Zod just doesn't think that way, he's just not going to think that way, right? Like if he doesn't, then I don't know, his worldview is just going to be different. This is kind of the problem of moral philosophy, right?
It seems odd though, because to me it seems like experience generates value, like empirical value is generated from like our experiences, like pain does have value, and it is like an extremely visceral negative, and the heights of pain are more visceral than the heights of pleasure, and it seems very demonstrable to experience that. Like if you could like have like $1 million and push a button, but then a nail would just like shove right through your hand, like tear down your arm, and the doctor would be right there to just like repair it up, and you would be completely fine within an hour. Like logically speaking, $1 million and you're going to be completely fine in an hour. But that pain is just so visceral and so like intense and just so opposed to like our biological like programming. That's just like, it's hard to deny that, like, even if you philosophically are like, no, I don't think that pain is like that terrible. I think like it's worth it to endure pain for the goods, or like pain equals gain or whatever. Like I feel like no, it's there's something about pain that's just visceral and true that like just makes so it's like inherently universally valued as like a for subjects. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get you. Listen, we do have to wrap up this call because we got some other folks that want to talk to us. But in short, Brandt, I am very sympathetic to those ideas personally, and I understand that others may not. Zod may have other, counter arguments he wants to bring here. But look, I think in short, there is a lot of suffering in life, and we may delude ourselves to thinking that, like, look, there's some good things in the world, and maybe that makes up for all the bad things. I'm not sure if that's true. And that's just like a really hard pill for most people to swallow. But at least from my point of view, that might be the case. If we look at the aggregate suffering of not just human beings, but any beings that are conscious enough to experience this subjective feeling of pain, it may outweigh the good. But that fact alone isn't going to stop me from living right now. And I guess I'm going to hang my hat on that so I can, keep on doing what I'm doing. But Brandt, I appreciate you calling, and I appreciate you bringing up that book. I'm glad it's a book that I've actually read, or at least partially read, so that I can have something to say about it, because it's a good one. I would say people go check it out if you're interested. Thomas Ligotti, Conspiracy Against the Human Race, if you like that sort of thing. But yeah,
I would like to add, I'm not like flatly philosophically against exploring
Sure.
any of these ideas he's talking about.
sure.
I'm just describing that there is a middle ground where you can cope. I think you have to find a way to engage with these ideas enough to make life real and to function in it and to kind of be prepared for what's going to happen. Also to be decent enough to the living beings, whether it's animals or people around you. You got to find a way to engage with that enough without it becoming debilitating.
Yeah.
And how you do that is one of the trickier questions in life, I think.
Yeah. So that's going to be all the time we have for that call. Thanks again for calling in on that. We're going to just quickly jump to the next call. I'm not sure if this is actually the person who says that's calling in right now, but I'm going to talk to anyway. Is this Baked Alaska calling in from New York? Like the Baked Alaska?
not the one, if you're thinking of the infamous streamer Baked Alaska.
Okay. Because I kind of freaked out for a little bit there. I was like, is Baked Alaska actually calling into Truth Wanted right now? But I guess it's a different Baked Alaska. Okay. Whew. Gave me a fucking heart attack there, dude. What the fuck?
It's my favorite dessert. In fact, I never would have picked this username if I had known about that individual. But it is my favorite ice cream, and so I've just stuck with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's Baked Alaska. For those of you who don't know, that's a whole other story. But if you want to know about like very big anti-Semitic people on the internet right now, like doing crazy stuff, like go look up Baked Alaska, because that's a whole other thing. But anyway, other Baked Alaska, what do you got for us today?
Yeah, what's up, man? So I've been engaging with some of the wise souls in your chat, as I often do when I listen to the show. I always enjoy listening in and engaging with the people in the chat. There tends to be sometimes this thread, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on it, that basically theists don't have any evidence for God's existence. A lot of people seem to take that view. I think it's patently false and absurd, but I'm kind of curious what you guys think. Do you guys agree with some of the more hardliners in the chat, or do you think there are some good reasons for believing, but you're just not convinced?
So I'm hearing two different things here. Just to clarify, there's good reasons to believe, and there's evidence. I would say those are two different things, in my point of view. I would say there's evidence for sure. Are there good reasons to believe, though? I think that's different. I think there are certainly reasons to believe. I'm not sure if I would evaluate them as good, if that makes sense. Now, the reason why I say there's evidence is because I think if you're to make certain apologetic arguments towards the existence of God, and even Christian God or any other kinds of God, there are going to be things that you can consider as evidence. And I'm totally okay with that. But we can evaluate evidence in different ways, right? And there may be other kinds of evidence that can counteract other evidence, right? Like you can have one study that says one thing and 10 other studies that say a different thing, and they might both be evidence towards different things, but the evidence for one claim might be better overall than another one. Now, how we evaluate it, what are the methods we use? I mean, that's philosophy, right? That's philosophy of science, but that's a whole debate. So it's the question of, is there evidence for God? Potentially, I think evidence is there, but I don't know if it's good evidence, if that makes sense. So very, very careful in my word choice. But that's my take. Zod, what do you think?
To me, this question, unless we're more specific, is probably going to drill down to a level of semantics I'm not super interested in. To me, when somebody says there is evidence for something, that usually connotes something along the line of hard evidence, or something that you can show somebody that indicates something is real. I don't see that for Christianity. I don't see anything that gives me a good reason to believe. So aside from splitting hairs over exactly what evidence is and whether there's good or bad evidence, I would say no, in the sense that I don't find it compelling, but I don't I don't know that that means that you can conclusively say there's nothing that can be called evidence. Once you get down to that fine of a point, don't find the question that interesting. So I would suspect that most people in the chat, if they're telling you there is no evidence for Christianity, they probably mean, even if they're being imprecise with their language, that they don't find compelling reason to believe in it. They're not saying conclusively there's no kind of argument, there's no kind of indication that a Christian can take to justify their belief, just that it's not evidence in the way that most of us think of evidence when we think of a compelling reason to believe in something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might have been long-winded, but this is a little bit of a fine-toothed question. And unless there was an example of something you were referring to. Go ahead.
So I actually agree with both of you, and I think that's a very reasonable stance. I think, however, though, that, and I'm not being contrarian, I think the position that some people take is there is no evidence. They're not. See, the way I've gone back and forth, like, over the years, like, I was raised Christian, and then as I got older, I sort of became agnostic and almost, I would say, atheist at some point, and then came back, like most people do. Like, you kind of go in these circles in terms of your belief. And what did it for me, in part, was like weighing what I thought were the arguments, weighing what I thought the evidence is. And I think there is evidence on both sides. I think the atheist is rational, right? But I hear a lot of times, like, atheists say, like, being a theist is irrational, right? And to me, like, that's an irrational position, right? And I think some atheists take the position, like, there is no evidence for God. Like, it's this, like, pixies, it's this imaginary character in the sky. You have absolutely no evidence for it at all. Everything, the Bible, the whole thing's a made-up book, right? You'll hear claims are not evidence, right? Which obviously they are. Like, if someone is making a claim, it is a form of testimonial evidence. Now, you may not think it's strong evidence. It may not count for barely anything, but we would generally consider that to be evidence because it has some tendency of making some fact of consequence more or less, likely to be true or not. So yeah, it is semantics on some level, but I think this is where the debate, like, when you get into the debate with a lot of people, this is where the debate actually, like, this is what actually you end up debating with people, where they're like, no, you don't have anything,
Couple things I have. One, I just want to clarify something, and that one, we're always going to be defining words however we want to define them, right? So, like, there's always going to be some, especially in philosophy, like, ask 10 philosophers what rational means, and you're probably going to get 10 maybe very similar but different answers, right? Like, there's, even in the subject of philosophy, there's not true universal definitions for what even the most basic terms mean. And that's just, I don't know, I guess that's just part of being human. Sartre would say it's because, the language is all that we have, and it doesn't actually universally signify anything. There is no universe. But postmodernism aside, the point is, right, when we're talking about, like, specific things like using claim, right? Claim versus a testimony could be evidence, but a claim may not actually be evidence, right? If I have testimony that I saw Zod murdered somebody, that is evidence, right? But if I say there's an invisible teapot on Mars and I'm just making a claim, that's not a testimony, right? I didn't see anything to it. I'm not attesting to the account of it. I'm just saying it, right? So, like, even then there's some semantic stuff that is important. But again, I do go back to this idea that, look, evidence may be there if you interpret certain claims. You can find evidence for claims. It's my position is just, well, if we look at the aggregate sum of the world and our experiences and what we can observe and measure, I think it points to claims that don't endorse theism in really any recognizable way, right? That's really how I think about this stuff. I just don't think the evidence points to theism as a whole. But
that's part of why. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I totally get that view, right? The debate I'm having with the chat, and as we're talking, I'm seeing that some of them are saying, like, where's your evidence, right? Because They want me to now get into the substance and provide the actual like meat and potatoes. And I've avoided doing that because I wanted to hear what your guys' higher level view of it was, right? Because it seems to me you guys are agreeing with me. There is what you would, forget the semantics, what is colloquially known as evidence or reasons for believing something. You do agree that there is some of that there in support of theism, right? And
well, no, there's the distinction. I don't think it's in support of theism.
Yeah,
that's the difference. Just because there's evidence doesn't mean it's in support. In the legal process, right? You go through discovery, you go through the exchange of evidence. That doesn't mean it supports one thing or the other. It's just what's going to be used, in discussion, right? So yes, there's evidence. No, I don't think it supports theism. That's
why I find these kinds of discussions very uninteresting and possibly counterproductive, because you can whittle your way down to some kind of semantic admission that there is something called evidence. But when you say there's evidence for Christianity, that connotes something entirely different.
Yeah.
And so when you work your way down to that admission and then start using language that way, I feel like theists like to fight these battles over semantics. And this might sound a little accusatory, but there's a tendency to want to do this, to fight your way down to some kind of semantic victory over the meaning of a word. And then can you using a word that might be technically correct according to the admission you got out of somebody, but then that connotes something completely different. And that's what I think we're seeing unfold in this conversation. We're already running into confusion. Just to clarify,
this would be a pyrrhic victory. This would be a pyrrhic victory for me. I would win nothing by you guys conceding this point, because I think I think it's absurd to suggest the opposite, right? Because I'm already saying, like, I think being an atheist is rational. Like, you're totally justified and rational being an atheist, right? But I'm just saying the opposite isn't true. And that's what I'm taking objection with, right? It's so often presented that way. And ironically, and here's what I find really ironic. A lot of the people who make that claim to be the type of atheists where they're like, well, I just withhold belief in God. I'm not really like a strong atheist making the claim that there is no God. I just lack the belief that there is a God. So it's like, on one hand, they're saying I'm irrational for being a theist or for thinking there's any evidence at all. But on the other hand, they're like, but I'm just withholding belief. You know, I'm not saying one thing or the other. I'm not taking the position that there is a God.
So what?
It's totally inconsistent. How can you hold both of those?
Go ahead, Zod.
To clarify my point, I'm not trying to say that you're trying to win a specific victory. I don't think this is all conscious, and I don't think this is all done with a specific end goal in mind. But what I think results regardless is that there ends up being a certain amount of confusion over the word, and it ends up being used in a certain way that as we saw in this conversation, that already created some confusion over whether Dan and I admitted that the word evidence could be used in a certain way versus if we thought that evidence spoke in favor of theism, which I absolutely do not think it does. So I like to just completely back out of the weeds on this and quit trying to distinguish between whether people think there's good reason to believe in theism or whether there's any evidence for theism, which again, we're already bouncing back and forth between these two different things that people could mean. And so you end up chasing your tail in circles over the precise meanings of words. And I already hear you during this call constantly correcting yourself over what the chat actually meant when they were telling you things. And those are very substantially different things. And so it just creates a ton of confusion. So I like to back out of it completely, treat Christianity like I would treat any other claim about a ghost or a vampire or a UFO or anything else like that, or whatever the term is for the flying saucers now, and just say, I don't see compelling reason to believe in it. The reason we go down this rabbit hole so far is because Christianity is a bigger, more prominent supernatural paranormal claim in our society. And so we end up picking through the precise language of how we doubt. Versus with vampires, I'm allowed to just be satisfied with the fact that I don't believe and I don't see good reason to believe in it.
Yeah.
And so I want the freedom to do that with Christianity without getting mired down into the weeds of exactly whether I see what can be categorized as some form of evidence or whatever. I just find that uninteresting and counterproductive. That's all I have to say.
And just to say a few more words on this, rationality is also, again, another word that we might contest to, because you're saying there are people that call Christianity irrational, and I would say, yeah, by a certain definition, you can still say irrational if rationality is, if we're defining it as comporting to logic, right? I could still say, like, yeah, it's still illogical, it's still irrational, and that would be my point of view. It doesn't mean that it's, you know, the objective truth, but I don't think people are necessarily wrong if they're saying, from my point of view, this is irrational, right? But like, I also don't actually have too much of a problem when people take the lack theist point of view that you pointed out, which is a withholding of belief from God. Obviously, in proper philosophical circles, this isn't that hasn't been the norm for atheism, right? This is why there's a big debate on what atheism actually means. Is it the withholding of the belief, or is it the positive claim that there are no gods? Historically, for a lot of atheist literature, it actually has meant the positive claim that there are no gods. So people have kind of come up with this way of saying, well, I just want to withhold belief. Some people say that isn't actually a philosophical proposition because it's more describing a psychological state. If that's true, then people still calling themselves atheists, all they're doing is describing a psychological state. There's nothing wrong with that. But it may give issues in how you analyze your logic. Point is, like, I want to try to listen to people with the words that they use and understand what they mean when they say the words that they use. Otherwise, we get into very long, drawn out debates about semantics here. But if you want my official take, is there evidence by some definitions of the word evidence? Yes. Do I think it supports theism, though? Do I think a person who is clearly thinking is going to be able to come to the conclusion that theism is real based on the evidence that they would have available, at least the same evidence that I have access to? No, I don't think so. And maybe you have issues with that, but I don't know. That's my take. Baked Alaska, I'll let you comment on that before we let you go here.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, Dan, and I think your ObjectivelyDan username is quite fitting, because I think you do your best to be objective, and I'll actually take that as a win over exceptionally average in the chat, who is claiming that I would not be able to solicit any type of concessions from you guys if I called in. No, I'm being facetious. I know I totally get what you guys are saying. The only closing thoughts were just, I'll just keep it brief. Like, yeah, I think in terms of like analytical philosophy, like, it is the positive claim that God does not exist, because otherwise, if it's just saying that you lack the belief in God, I mean, I could say I lack the belief that God does not exist, and what does that do, right? Like, how do we move forward in the conversation if we just both say we lack beliefs in these ontologically different things? So I think you need to make claims, and then I think you need to have like honest conversations, and weigh the reasons, weigh the rationales. I mean, I think it's absurd to compare God and metaphysical hypothesis to like aliens or Dracula or the other things that were mentioned that have absolutely no explanatory power scope from a metaphysical perspective. There's absolutely no reason to think those things exist.
I don't know.
Everybody feels that way about their specific paranormal claim.
Yeah. Actually, I actually totally disagree with you on that. I think there's definitely more reasons to think aliens exist than a lot of God concepts, right? I mean,
there's nothing out for an explanation. Like, so if we didn't observe UFOs, right?
We don't have time. I'm sorry, we don't have time. I know that there's ontological arguments for the existence of God, right? If we're talking about from a metaphysical perspective, and yeah, okay, maybe there could be, but there's also physical evidence to suggest aliens exist. And I'm not talking about like people that we can visit. I'm just talking about what we know about the universe and its formation and how we got here. We can at least imagine hypothetical possibilities that comport to a reality that aliens exist, right? Like, you don't even have to use ontological arguments to go there. But look, I am serious though. I do have to let you go. I wanted to give you your piece on that. So thank you for calling in and discussing your point of view. And one last thing as well. I'm ObjectivelyDan. I'm not Objective Dan. It's a common misnomer. Okay, I don't make claims that I'm objective. That I think maybe I chose a bad username because I think that's what people think, and it sounds really pretentious. But it's just kind of a joke because like saying you're objectively Dan doesn't really mean anything, and I just think it's funny. That's kind of my sense of humor. But anyway,
At least you're not philosophically Dan.
Yeah, I know we've been talking a lot about philosophy today. Maybe I should be philosophically Dan, but that also sounds pretentious, to be honest. It's that's anyway. Zod, you have thoughts?
Not much more. I
Okay.
know there's always some distinction people can make between God and other paranormal claims. I think part of that has to do with that it's their favorite. Part of it has to do with the fact that God claims has advanced enough in our society that there are more God of the gaps arguments than other arguments. It fills more of those gaps in our knowledge. I don't know. I use that only as an analogy for moving toward a paranormal claim, whatever you think of the nature of that claim, I guess.
Yeah, that again goes into philosophy of science, right? It is this idea of like, do we know things because we empirically understand them? Is that our only way of knowing things, or are there knowledge claims that we can evaluate that don't rely on our senses, right? Are there maybe a priori claims that we can know, or claims that can only be found on constructs like logic, which don't really have an analogous empirical thing we can look at? So yeah, again, very deep stuff that we kind of just scratched the surface of, but riveting conversation nonetheless. I do appreciate it sincerely. Before we get to the end of the show here, real quickly, letting you know, if you want to email the show, you can totally do it. It's truth@atheist-community.org. You can also reach out to the ACA. It's tv@atheist-community.org and see what's been going on our website at atheist-community.org. Who would have thought? There's also a Facebook group. It's run by fans for fans. So check that out, tiny.cc/FBTWG. Saw somebody posting about the UFO stuff today. So glad people are talking about the content on there. And lastly, have you ever said to yourself, I really love what the content, I love the stuff that the ACA is making, but I really wish I could just get it in like all of my pores, all of my holes in my body. I just want to be surrounded by ACA content 24/7 and bathe in Objectively Dan's voice. Well, that's weird, but you can kind of do that. There's a couple different ways, actually. We have tiny.cc/AXPTV, which is a 24/7 live stream of the Atheist Experience, and a separate live stream for Talk Heathen, which I also host on. So you can at least kind of get me for some of the time if you go to tiny.cc/HeathenTV. Both of them are 24/7 live streams, and both of them have very active chats with lots of people in it. So if you just want to talk to other people who like the show, that's another way to do it. Man, so we got like some other interesting calls, but man, we're out of time for today. I don't think you can talk anymore.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, it's too bad. Well, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
They should go to youtube.com and search for Prophet of Zod. Basically, anywhere you type Prophet of Zod, I'm probably the only thing you're going to find, but YouTube is the main place. Twitter's probably the main social media, or X, or whatever it's called now.
It's X now, okay? Stick to the branding. It's X, all right? We got to call it that.
So if you're looking to engage with me on social media, X marks the spot, you could say. So yeah,
don't give Elon Musk any ideas.
Yeah,
Zod,
YouTube.
Please.
If you type Prophet of Zod into YouTube, you'll find my channel. I always say I'd be lying if I didn't want you specifically to find me. But what I really want for all of you sincerely is to find some kind of atheist content that works for you and helps you process your experience. I know I don't work for everybody. If I do, great. If not, find somebody else. And also, if you type the word Zadanza into YouTube, you will find nothing but a page where you can subscribe.
That's right.
Starting this next Thursday at 9 Central, 10 Eastern, you can see more of the two of us doing our live thing. So
doing our thing. Very different from a call-in show, we hope, and should be fun. So check that out and subscribe to see our joint project that we're working on together that we've been like working on for an embarrassingly long time, to be honest. It's
We've been rehearsing this Unwatched for a long time because we do really want to nail it. There are a lot of live streams out there, but we do want a nice tight show for you guys, and we want something other than people just kind of sitting around, you know, babbling. So we're working hard on it. We're doing our best. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yes, we do. And we aren't going to be doing an after show today, but hey, if you watch us live, sometimes we do after shows on the Atheist Community of Austin Discord. So another reason why you should join live is to maybe jump on there. But before we end things, I also have to thank the wonderful, fantastic, stupendous crew that helped make this show happen every single week. We got the crew cam showing the folks behind the scenes that help make this show happen. Folks, I don't know if it's most actually, but a lot of the work, I think it's most, but a lot of the like man hours that go into making the show is by volunteer labor. It is by labors of love, including the crew, including myself, including Zod. We don't pay people to host. We don't pay people to do a lot of parts of this show. It's all folks who want to volunteer. So if you want to volunteer and help out, there's a couple ways you can do that. Of course, I already mentioned the email addresses as well, and checking out our website and seeing what opportunities we have real quick, because I don't always plug that, but yeah, we always love it when people want to volunteer. So just to reiterate, the prompt this week is write a horoscope that applies to everyone and comment below and give your best shot, although I think Zod really nailed it this time. But Zod, we're out of time for this week. We got to wrap things up. Any words of wisdom that you have for us?
2 words of wisdom. Number one, it was not a chat GPT. I wrote it based on my extensive experience with horoscopes. Number 2, I just want to throw a little grenade in there. There's very little difference between lacking belief in something and believing it's not true, functionally speaking.
Oh, shit.
Goodbye.
Oh, shit. Zod's like, listen, I'm going to throw this out there and just like, he's going to put his sunglasses on and walk away from that explosion. He's like, see you later, comment section. He's out.
Shoot, this thing's not shutting off. Damn.
That's pretty bold of you, Zod. Or cowardly, depending on how you want to look at that. But I appreciate those words of wisdom. And thank you to everybody who's been watching tonight's show. I am Objectively Dan. This has been another episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth. And I'll see you next time.
Watch the non-prophets and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.